Change is possible. This podcast will show you how. Jack, I am truly in awe of, I suppose, the person you are today in so many ways, especially in terms of how you've navigated some of the most difficult things that life can throw at anyone. And I'd like to go deep from the very, very start. Could you tell me about the most challenging time you ever had in your life?
Right. Well, first thing is to take me off the pedestal of being in awe, because I'm definitely just very much human. And I think that will resonate when I think about some of the harder things I've faced. You know, I sustained a spinal injury when I was 20, and the result of that is that I'm quadriplegic with 15% muscle function. A very simple accident, diving into water. I used to work as a lifeguard and a windsurfing instructor during the summers, and the water was my passion. And I had an accident on the first day of a holiday with some of my best friends. We'd been swimming in the same place all day, kicking a ball around, catching up after having different summer jobs. And I went for one more swim before dinner, ran down the beach, dived into the water over a wave, not realizing how shallow it was, and my head collided with the sandbank, and there was a click, a little bit of heat, and literally like someone just pulled out the power cord and my whole body went limp. And I was 20 years old. I just turned 20, and I suppose in a way I went from being very familiar, or being a young person that felt that they had the world at their feet. You know, I was increasingly independent and free and able in the world. And going from that position to a total unknown of the world of a spinal injury and of losing control of so much of my body and so on. And but there was that transcended just the physical. It was a paradigm shift in terms of the way that I navigated the world. It was, and I mean that in terms of how I saw things from a mental perspective. It was a huge grief journey. It was a massive identity challenge as a very active, adventurous young person, to literally not being able to scratch my own nose for a long time. I spent 28 days in intensive care, 28 days in the high dependence unit, 49 days fully dependent on a ventilator to breathe. And then I began 196 days in rehab. And, you know, all of that was very demanding on me. But I would say the most challenging part of it was reconciling the grief journey that came afterwards. And that was personally the hardest. But what hurt me nearly more than the personal grief for the life that I had planned, that was now in some ways lost in the way that I had imagined it unfolding, I would say that greater than that was a sense of weight or guilt that I carried for a period of time around the impact that it had on my family, like my parents, my two younger sisters, and yes, my friends as well, but particularly my family, and that would be known as, you know, second victim.
Yeah.
And that hurt nearly more than anything, because everyone asks, "Oh, how's Jack?" You know, in the aftermath, but nobody asks, "Oh, how are the girls?" And that was challenging for me, because I suppose their older brother, you know, you feel like their protector to a certain extent, has been knocked off his perch, and so to speak, and And it was very confronting for them in a lot of ways, but it also meant that I'd been in boarding school and I was off in college, and I'd lived down the west of Ireland as an instructor, and I had a very close relationship with my family, but I was a very independent young person from my early teenage years. And going from that to moving back home and to being highly dependent and to being, I suppose, in need of a lot of assistance, particularly in the earlier days. That meant people were in the family space, at a time when we were comprehending all of this and coming to terms with it, that in many ways our life wasn't our own for a period of time, because we needed the support of others, to a great extent. And I think, I felt a sense of weight around all of that. And the hard part of it, and how it's tied into the grief as well, is that, and I said this, well, I couldn't speak, but I mouthed it to my parents when they arrived in Portugal and I was in intensive care. And one of them came to each side of the bed, and I said, I did nothing wrong. And I started crying. Because it was a freak accident. It was a simple thing. I was just playing.
You done everything right. You were doing what you were supposed to do.
I wasn't drinking. If it had happened the night before, maybe when we were out, but I'd done nothing wrong, and so there was no one to blame, and blaming myself wasn't going to be helpful. And so I think that was a hard part of it, is that because there was no one to blame, the grief, and as part of grief, there's two different models. There's the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross model. It's a 5-stage model, and then that was kind of the initial grief journey, and then there's a new 7-stage model. But the different phases include like shock and denial. When the thing happens, you lose someone you love, you have a big setback, because grief shows up not just in the loss of someone, but in the loss of a relationship, in the loss of finances, in the loss of an imagined future, in the loss of the normal functioning of your body. It's all the different things. And so there's the shock and denial when the thing initially happens. Then you go through a period of anger and bargaining. I'll do this for the rest of my life if I get X back. I'll devote myself to the church or whatever it is if I get something in return. That's the bargaining. And then the anger and the frustration of the scenario comes in. And then you hit a natural dip. And that's the depression. It's the feeling of being pushed down, by the circumstances of what's happened. And that's actually a natural response to the loss of something, it's an important piece. And so you could say you're in the valley at that point, the innermost cave in the hero's journey. And from that place, you begin to reconstruct. And that's what they call the next phase, is the reconstruction. And so after this loss of whatever it is in your life, you go on a journey of reconstruction. But that takes time. And in a way, you're coming out of the valley of depression and back up the mountain. And you might have to take lots of side tracks to reconstruct. And the further you get up that journey, the more perspective you get, because you're getting to a higher height on out of the valley, so to speak.
Yeah.
And at the top, you've got the greatest perspective of all. And that's when this idea of acceptance and hope comes in. But what I would say is that sounds like a nice, coherent model, but it doesn't happen in a stepwise
It's
fashion.
messier than that.
Yeah, it doesn't happen in a stepwise fashion. Like you can be in one stage for weeks, months, years, or you can experience 5 stages in a day at times, And certainly what I would have said, and I heard this phrase a few years ago, is different levels, different devils. And it's like over time, you come to terms with or unbox one part of the grief cycle,
Yeah, it's
or
layered.
the processing, or the dealing with a trauma, or whatever it is in life. And you process that part and you come to terms with that part, and you have acceptance of that part, and whatever else comes with it. And then things will go nice and smoothly for a little while, and life will bring up the next piece for you then. And you go through the the phases again. And so I would say it was the intertwining of those two pieces of the sense of heaviness or guilt or responsibility towards my family, and then the grief cycle myself. And you know that drives certain behaviors, and we can talk about that. um but I will just bring you to one moment that stands out in all of that, which is I had spent, as I said, 7 months in rehab after my various hospital stays. And like coming out of rehab, I could do absolutely nothing. Like I could just about push my wheelchair on a perfectly level surface in a hospital, you know. And I can remember one day in the hospital, it was a Sunday, and I had a little bit of time to myself, and I tried to get out of the ward into the hallway. And when I say there was a lip on the door, I mean it was a centimetre of a rise, if even. And the challenge of getting over that lip just to get into the hallway, it might as well have been Mount Everest, like.
Wow.
And coming out into the hallway then, and my left shoulder was more severely affected by the implications of the spinal injury than the right. And so I had this imbalance, and I was going along the hall, and there was, whatever way the floor was laid, there was a slight fall away to the left hand side. And I remember trying to push down the hallway and just veering ever so slightly towards the wall, and ending up pushed up against the wall, and
You were helpless, like, to do anything
being
about it.
and being so weak that I couldn't fix it. And that sense of vulnerability, and that was within the safe space of the hospital that's perfectly set up, or the rehab facility. But then I got back out of rehab and I moved back home, as I said, and the west of Ireland always represented this place to me. It was full of freedom and adventure, and what's over the next hill, what's behind the sand dune.
Yeah.
But like, it was just full of adventure for me. And I went on a week-long holiday with my family down there, and we had all sorts of people involved to make it work, because I was still quite medically vulnerable, I would say, at that time. But I was turning 21 that week, and the real deep sense of being faced with my new reality was, I was really having to confront it. And this place of adventure and freedom all of a sudden became the most isolating and restricting place.
All the opportunities nearly disappeared of what you would have seen before, yeah.
Because I just didn't have the equipment to navigate this space, this rugged, which I love, this rugged, unkempt surroundings of the west of Ireland was just now such a hostile place to be a wheelchair user in. And I was surrounded by very close family, friends, and my own family. And yet there was a couple of days where I just couldn't bring myself to speak or make eye contact with people, because I was processing so much myself, but I was afraid that they would see the level of emotional pain that I was in. And I remember writing a poem in the kitchen that day, the day I turned 21, and I don't have the exact language of it now, but I remember that part of it talked about the salt from my tears stinging my cheeks as you know, as the tears dried up, and needing a plaster to fix the wound that I was experiencing. But I hadn't found one that fit yet. And actually, I didn't need a plaster. I just needed to allow the time for the wound to heal from the inside out, you know? And so, yeah, simple question, Brian. 10 minutes later.
I love it, Jack. And do you know what? I am going to say I'm an Avi, because I am. And I remember someone asked me, who's your hero? And I was like, someone asked me that a long time ago. And I says, I don't really have any heroes in life. And I think me family. And you sprung to mind. And I faced adversity in my life, but you faced adversity that's on a whole other level. But how you think about other people, I'm humbled listening to you, how even in the depths of it, you think about other people. And there's a couple of memories, Jack, like we know each other well, we've met many times, I'd consider you a friend. But there's a couple of images you were talking about that night before the accident happened, and you remember looking back in the footsteps in the sand, and it felt like your whole life was ahead of you that day. And then the following day or a couple of days later after the accident, you woke up, I think your family or your family weren't there, your friends were there, and you came to, and you were sort of in a voice-like thing to stop you from moving and stuff like that. Like the level of comparison to where you were, to where you were going, and to where you are now, that's why I'm in so much awe of where you were. But like, what I was trying to step into your shoes, like before we were chatting, I was saying, what would that feel like? How would I have been able to cope with that? Like, what was going through your mind? What were you feeling in that moment? Was there coherence of what was going on? Like, or
Yeah, it was remarkable. So when I dove into the water, there's the click and the heat, as I mentioned, and then my body just goes limp, and I'm face down in the water. And I was the irony of the situation hits you, because I was the best trained of all of the lads on the beach to deal with that scenario. What you don't often hear told is that one of my best friends dove into the water at the same time, and his cheek brushed off the sandbank that I hit. So there could have been two of us.
wow.
And it was ultimately him that pulled me out of the water. Now, there was a period when he thought I was playing and joking and playing dead, sort of a thing. And in that time, you know, I had no awareness that there was anyone around that could help. And I'm face down in the water, and time kind of slows down. And
This is it.
yeah, but time slows down a little bit. And I knew exactly what had happened. I knew that I had a certain amount of time before oxygen would run out, and just your natural response is you breathe in, and that would be water. And that's ultimately what happened. But luckily, I didn't take on enough that I drowned. But your mind does go to places, and at the time, you know, I remember thinking about my parents and my two younger sisters and the dog at home and the lads on the beach, and you wonder, would they get to you? And if they didn't, how would they deal with that? And then luckily I was taken out of the water, and I told the lads on the beach, you know, I've damaged my neck. I think I might be paralyzed. And they're like, you know, you've got a stinger, you'll be all right. As we're waiting for the paramedics to arrive. And I was like, no, like my breathing is declining.
You know.
I understand what this means. Like, and so there was the very real awareness of the potential implications of this. But there's that, and then there's, you know, I was air ambulanced away. I remember my friends standing at the end of the ambulance that brought me to the helipad, and them not knowing where I was going, me not knowing where I was going, me being strapped to a spinal board with my head held in place and my neck stabilized and all of this, and my breathing was declining, and I couldn't get a breath in. And as the swelling went up my spinal cord, the control of my intercostal muscles that help you to breathe in and out, and my diaphragm that pulls your lungs down, that was all dissipating. the control of those, and I couldn't get a breath in, and I couldn't cry out for help. And that was when I got scared, because I felt very alone in that moment. And waking up in intensive care, I still remember counting the 8 screws in the light fitting above my head. You know, you're clawing for things because you're sort of, I suppose, groggy from pain medication and so on, and you're fighting for things that are real. And it's like, well,
Yeah.
I can see that above me.
Yeah.
And I remember counting the 8 screws, and I remember very vividly my parents coming in. I remember my mates coming in at different periods, and the fear on their faces, and me nearly putting them at ease. I couldn't speak, so we developed this way of kind of predictive texting. One of them would stand on each side of the bed, and one would be in charge of consonants and the other in charge of vowels, and we'd figure out like what I was trying to say. And then we had a letter board that they would point to the letters, and I remember it taking me about half an hour one day to say, this is the Portuguese alphabet. It doesn't have certain letters that we use in English. And I couldn't say certain words because of that, and the frustration.
Oh, God.
But, you know, I was completely helpless. Like when I got back to Ireland, I was in the Mater, and I had double pneumonia. Both my lungs, one was partially collapsed, and I had lost voluntary control of breathing, and so I had double pneumonia anyway. And the infection was quite bad, and I was hallucinating and the sweating. And I remember the royal wedding, one of the royal weddings was on, and me lying in bed hallucinating and watching this and thinking, sure, where else would you watch the royal wedding? Like, this is the most normal thing in the world. And so you're going from that kind of sort of dystopian reality that you find yourself in to the absolute vulnerability of it later that week. In the middle of the night, like one of the things that comes with a spinal injury is you no longer sweat or shiver below your level of injury.
I didn't know that.
The autonomic nervous system is affected in quite a number of ways. And so like really, in some way, a lot of the body systems below your level of injury are affected.
Yeah.
So that means that I have like all sorts of secondary considerations aside from the lack of movement is kind of the easier part to deal with.
Okay.
In any spinal injury. And I just remember I had this infection, and I had a blanket over me that was filled with cool water that was being pumped through to regulate my temperature because I was so hot. And the only noise that I could make was a clicking, sort of gagging noise. And I remember it was the middle of the night, and I was so hot. It was just unbearable. And I was on the ventilator, so I couldn't speak, and my mouth was completely parched. And as I said, this gagging sort of clicking sound was the only noise I could make. And there was one nurse between 3 rooms, and she was going around doing her rounds. And as she walked past the door, the entrance to my room, there was every 20 minutes or so, there was like a 2-second window where if she wasn't actually coming into me, I had the opportunity to get her attention. And that feeling of vulnerability.
Helplessness.
Oh, it was horrendous, you know? So I think, you know, it was very much like a baby in some ways in terms of that helplessness, but with the mind of an adult and the awareness of what I was experiencing. And so you have to go and learn ways to go inwards, and there's a mental battle there, and there's and so on, and find ways to process this or to put your mind to work. And I think we're capable of dealing with more than we give ourselves credit for. And people say, I don't know how I'd respond, and that's just it. You don't.
Yeah.
And then you're in it.
It's really interesting because that's something I've talked to other people about. Like, there's an inner strength that's there that we don't know about, that you don't test yourself until the challenges come. But I really want to get on.
Can I just,
Please do.
the other self.
Yeah.
I call it the other
The
self.
other self.
And it's that
Love
part of
that.
you only uncover or discover or realize is there when you're faced with a significant challenge or you choose to take one on.
Yeah.
So, for example, now I love physically challenging myself because I like to get acquainted with that other self. And who was it? Mark Pollock said, sometimes there's challenges we choose and sometimes challenges choose us. I love that. Like,
beautiful.
and so there's challenges that I choose now.
Yeah.
You're into physical fitness.
I'm the same. Yeah.
So many people, they put themselves through things that others just don't understand. But there's a space that you enter in doing that.
Yeah.
And it's magic. And you get to know a part of yourself. And in choosing to continue through that challenge, I think you learn that you're capable of doing that in other parts of your life.
Yeah.
But sometimes, as the saying says, the challenge chooses you. And in that space, you uncover this natural inner strength. It's a survival piece. It's, it's kind of deep down in there. But you have to, at some point, make a choice that you're going to entertain that.
Yeah, and it's nearly like it's a crazy thing to say. It's a gift, and I'm not going to speak for you, Jack, but like, there's been so many gifts through my addiction. Losing 15 years, there's been so many gifts within that as well, and it came through the pain and the discomfort that it opened up other parts of me, the other self, as you call it, that I would have never known was there. And is there an element, despite how tragic that what happened to you was, is there parts of you that feel that as well, that it unearthed something inside of you that you wouldn't have been able to access otherwise?
Oh, absolutely. Like, that's undoubted.
Yeah.
And I was chatting to someone there recently and they said, oh, would you turn back the clock and do anything differently? And I wouldn't. And the thing is there's a great book called The Midnight Library, and it
great book. Brilliant book.
So, to ruin the book for everyone, this lady has depression, and in the book, she gets the opportunity to live out various different lives that she could have lived if she made a slightly different decision. But every single life has upside and downsides. Yeah. And, so many good things have come with the journey that I've gone on after having my injury. So many good things.
Yeah.
The people, the experiences, the lessons, the insights, the
inspiration to others.
I wouldn't be sitting here with you, quite likely,
Yeah.
And you just don't know what other things might have unfolded that would be equally as challenging in different ways. Maybe not in sort of the younger years that this evolved for me if I didn't have the spinal injury, but maybe later in life, and so I think it's undoubted that I have had insights and become, not, I would say, a different person, but that I have had to tap into different parts of myself that would have maybe laid dormant for a long time otherwise, or I wouldn't have had reason to explore.
How many podcasts have a sponsor whose primary objective is creating positive changes around the world? With a focus on nurturing youth well-being, the Kind Foundation's message is simple. Kindness is powerful and worth paying forward. In each episode, we share a challenge inspired by their work and ethos. Small actions create big ripples. This week's challenge is about reconnection. Reach out to someone you haven't spoken to in a while, whether that's a family member, a sibling, a friend, a former co-worker. Reach out and say hello. There was something, Jack, that really tapped. I'm going to put my neuroscience hat on. You were talking about the autonomic nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. And it's a couple of things you mentioned about your injury that I wasn't aware of. But it just brings me to think, like, when I think of intuition, gut feelings, like, I was wondering to myself, like, what was it like for you mentally when you experienced that? Or what did it feel like physically? And then I was thinking, so you're cut off from bodily sensations and some of your autonomic nervous system. As your feelings in terms of how you experience the world, like gut intuition, was there a shift in that? Was there something different? For me, it looks like they were amplified, like especially with your empathy for other people. So did some shift there? Was there a change within that?
So I think, like, from an emotional feeling perspective, no, there wasn't a change there. Maybe you could say an amplification of it. Certainly became much more consciously aware of people and so on. But I would have always had like a reasonably strong empathy. Like, that was something that came out when I was a kid, actually. That would have been remarked on, actually, as a kid. So I would say no, but certainly from the physical sensation piece, you know, that's dramatically altered. Like, I don't have feeling in most of my body below my armpits. And so I think gut feeling is more of an inner than an outer.
Yeah, what is it?
Yeah.
That's the thing. It actually fascinated me thinking about that. Like, where does it actually come from? Yeah, that's interesting. And even butterflies and those inner experiences as well, like the butterflies and the nervousness, because you're a public speaker, a fantastic public speaker, but I would imagine you still get nervous. So, like, I was wondering, where does that live? Like, you know, it's...
Yeah, that's funny, because I definitely still experience those things,
Yeah.
but if I'm to compare it to before, maybe I get away a little bit from it being such an all-consuming. I know I don't. I think it's still, like, things like that still very much are embodied, and like, you need to sort of tools in the toolkit to manage those things in the same way as anyone else. You know, like this morning before I came here, you're such an intimidating character, Brian, that I had to ground myself.
Fair enough. I get to have loads of people, Jack.
No.
Oh, brilliant.
But I suppose, like, I know that you're massively into, I suppose, practices and so on that can help you to regulate your nervous system and come back to base. And I've needed all of those.
Yeah.
I've had to lean into different practices at different times, and to sort of gain more voluntary control of what are sort of autonomic responses that go on for all of us, you know.
Yeah.
And we can get swept away by those at times, and to manage the stresses and strains of life, you know. And I've needed that as much as anyone, and in some ways they've been really nearly more important during this period of my life than otherwise. I would say, like, so without realizing it, I was a very sporty, adventurous young person.
You're a windsurfer. You're big into windsurfing.
I was
weren't you?
really big
Yeah.
into water sports, surfing, sailing, but particularly windsurfing. Anything to do with the water. But I just loved being in the outdoors and adventuring. And I played a lot of rugby and did a lot of running when I was growing up as well. And would have given every sport a go, but like, they became my main sports as a teenager. But I got a lot of benefit from being in a team sport, but I did lean more towards individual pursuits. I loved running, and I loved the challenge of windsurfing, and that sort of it's you against yourself, and I really loved that, and it was a place for me to process things when I was out and about, and like I certainly got a flow state from windsurfing that was unparalleled. Like it's just you're just in it, and I love that so much, that balance between sort of your skill level and the challenge level, that just puts you in the moment. And to me, that was what I learned about flow later, studying
Yeah.
different areas. But that's what it was that kept me going back. And but all of those things, the running, the rugby, the windsurfing, or being on the water, they were all my ways of regulating myself
Yeah.
as a teenager, as a young adult. And all of those were taken away during the most stressful period in my life.
Mm.
And so you had to find different ways. And before we hit record, we were chatting about Buddhism.
Yeah.
And I remember reading a book by Thich Nhat Hanh called Fear, and taking so many insights from that. So I became quite into meditation and breathing practices like reasonably early after my injury, because I would get a lot of pain and things like that. A mix between, you know, joint and muscle pain from using the same muscles all the time, for a small number of muscles. So I have use of my shoulders, my biceps, and my wrists. Don't have tricep function, don't have finger function, and so I'm putting a lot through 15% muscle function,
Yeah.
and so I get kind of joint pain and so on, and tendinopathy every now and then, but I also get quite a bit of nerve pain. And so I leaned into meditation and breathing practices initially to control, or to help myself navigate those things. I would say not to control them, but to control my response to them, or how much it allowed me, much I allowed them to take over. So that was my first introduction to, okay, being on the water and on the rugby pitch and running are not possibilities at the moment. I need something else. And so that book, Fear, and by Thich Nhat Hanh, gave me kind of a little bit of an introduction to meditation, but more to the mindfulness practices and this idea of, embracing things as they are. And, it's that, like, if you allow it, instead of running away from it, if you allow it to be there, it kind of dissipates a bit. And some of those principles were really important to me for that early period. I read another book, and sometimes things just come to you at the right time, and it was called The Green Platform by Declan Coyle. And it's an incredible book. He's an incredible man. And the idea in the book really is like, life happens, things happen. And actually we get a choice about how we frame them. And so Viktor Frankl, it builds on Viktor Frankl's work of, between stimulus and response, there's a space. In that space is our freedom to choose, and in our choices, our growth, or in that choice is our growth and our freedom. And it's a similar philosophy, is that, life happens, events happen, and we get to choose whether we place them on a red or a green platform. Do we become the victim or the victor? Or the hero? Do we, is our life sabotaged and disempowered by the events of life? Or do we find ways to find solutions and take ownership and these kinds of things? And do we ask, why me or why not me? That was my way of phrasing it, and
Yeah.
and so those early things became sort of the tools in the toolkit to begin what ultimately, like, we started talking about the nervous system a few minutes ago, but they were all like, that was sort of a mind frame piece, was Declan's piece. The meditation and the breathing practices were kind of bringing me more into my body and an awareness of my body and reclaiming some control. The breath is just powerful in that way. Still use that very regular. And um, and then over time, I have regained access to sports in different ways and training my body in different ways. And
I wanted to go there because it's a couple of other how-to tools, Jack, because I really want to give people something that they can use. But you were talking about flow state, you were talking about sports, and I want to jump ahead to the incredible things you're doing today and the incredible life you have today. I get goosebumps every time. I love skiing as well, so that's why. But when I see it on the slopes, we gotta go skiing together sometime, Jack. That's something we'll need to do. But seeing you over on the slope, seeing you going speaking at these events and inspiring people, seeing you creating incredible social change out there as well. And I've met some of your family members as well. You have some incredible relationships. You have such a full life. Like, we chatted about the worst moments in your life in the past. Like, what are some of the best experiences that you live today? Tell me about the great stuff going on in your life today.
yeah, well, look, this is the thing. Is like after an injury like I sustained, you're told all the you will nevers. And like I kind of just said, feck that. Like, that's not going to be the story of my life. And so the last 12 years now since I had the injury are like, it's just a repeated cycle of asking, why not, of embracing the challenge mindset. So taking on the challenge. And I think when you embrace a challenge mindset, you tap into more of your internal and external resources. You start looking around to see what are the opportunities and how can I and who can help and these kind of things. And so like my life is very full and as you said, I have incredible people in my life. The relationships that I have in my life are so important to me. But like when I look at my values, my first most important value is my health. And if I don't invest in my health, everything falls down.
Yeah.
And that just happens a little bit more quickly for me. Like if I'm not keeping on top of my training, if I'm not taking care of my sleep and my nutrition and these kind of things, that's when the secondary complications become a challenge. And that's when the other blocks start to fall down. And so health is the foundation of the house for me. My relationships are so important to me. So, family and friends in particular, that's really important that I'm creating time to invest and spend time. And then for me, the last two pieces are meaningful work and adventure. Now, you can find meaning in any kind of work. It's a framing of it. But I want to do work that's meaningful to me. And the last bucket is adventure. And I can find adventure in all of those things, in my health pursuits, in my relationships, and in the work that I do. And so that's how I kind of set things up for myself. But as I've gone kind of challenging bit by bit the different you will nevers, like that's looked like at different times going back to college and graduating as a pharmacist. So I practiced for a while, but I see myself more as a health professional than a pharmacist in that I carry that lens into what I do in the world. Making documentaries about international road trips, like you will never travel, these kind of things, or it'll be incredibly difficult for you. I'm off to the States again next week. As you said, I'm very often over skiing and I love to travel. So that initial piece of you will never is being challenged. For me, physically challenging myself has been something that's really important. And that starts with the basic rehab that you do, and then that turns into training. And so I'm always training my body with where it is. Like I have a rehab session tomorrow. I'll be on the ground on a mat doing what look like the simplest of movements. They're so tedious. It is the most confronting part of my week doing those sessions. trying to tap into the edge of my limitations, and it just confronts you every time you do it, because the reality of the scenario is brought home to you, and you're exploring the subtlest edge of how you can increase the control over your body. And that is something that I live with, you know, and but I want to find that edge and keep challenging it. And so that's kind of on a rehab front, but then I look at that. People would ask, are you still doing physio or whatever? And I'd say, no, I'm training my body. Because you train your body at any time from where it is. And so that's one side of the training I do. But on the whole other side is like every day I stand in a standing frame once a week. I use kind of the cutting edge of modern technology. I was yesterday walking in an exoskeleton. So I did like 800 steps yesterday. My body was a bit fatigued. Usually I'll do in the region of 1,000 steps in a session. Tomorrow I'll have my rehab. On Thursday I'll be on the hand bike. And, you know, for me, getting on the hand bike was a really important thing early days, because for the first time it felt like I was doing something under my voluntary control that was moving me forward through space. And that sounds like a very simple thing, but there was so many layers to that. It was like progress. It was forward movement on the bike. And that started with doing 100 meters and then 1 kilometer and then 5. And I think you've read the book, The Comfort Crisis.
It's come into my mind about 10 times. The Misogi.
The Misogi. And so I read about this concept, and so I decided I was going to cycle 100k in a day.
Wow.
And
that's your Misogi. Do you want to explain Misogi? To people?
So Misogi, this book, The Comfort Crisis, talks about a concept called Misogi. It's a Japanese phrase that really talks about taking on a physical challenge for the means of spiritual purification.
Yeah, and it's so hard that it could nearly kill you, but it won't kill you. That's an important thing.
There has to be. Okay, so I think there's three or four rules to it. So the first is it should be a very unique challenge. So unique to you. So like if you've regularly run marathons, doing another marathon isn't a Misogi. It might be going for a 50k ultra.
Yeah.
It'd be something like that.
50% chance of failure, they say,
yes,
isn't
that's
it?
the second piece.
Yeah.
So it has to be unique to you. The second piece is there has to be on a knife edge. There needs to be a genuine 50-50 that you'll be able to complete this. The third rule is don't die, or it's like be safe or don't die, you know. And then they also say, like in the book, the rule that he adds is like, don't be doing it for all ego. Like, don't put it on social media that you're going to do it.
Yes.
Let it, like, if you are going to share it, let it be after the fact.
Yeah, because when I read that, I says, I'm going to do a Misogi. I'll stick it up on Instagram. And I says, oh no. So
like, share, subscribe.
Yeah, I could pretend I've done 10 of them, but I just don't tell anyone. But I haven't done it yet. I'll be honest. But it touches back onto that piece, Jack, finding the other side that you talked about. It'll help you to find the other side, a level of you that you don't know about.
Yeah, so I set this 100k as a Misogi, and so I spent the summer. It was great because for me it encompassed all of the things. This was an adventure, right? So I decided I was going to do it on the anniversary of my injury. I did the 100k 2 years ago now, and on the anniversary of my injury, all summer that meant that I got to spend time on the greenways of Ireland, out in nature, being active in the outdoors, with family, with friends, on the bike. But the longest training cycle I did was 60k. And I will caveat and say I was doing it on a hybrid bike. And the reason for that is I don't have tricep function. So come to the hilly areas and I just stop dead, like, because I can't get the push over the top. It's mostly a pulling motion that I'm doing using my biceps when I'm cycling. So, and kind of the same with my wheelchair, rather than pushing my wheelchair, because I don't have great strength in a forward motion, I'm kind of using my biceps to pull the wheelchair. It's kind of strange with my level of injury. But so I was using this hybrid bike, but I use it on the very lowest level of assist. And I had only ever trained up to 60k, and I had trained on it on this low level of assist. And on the day, I got to like 80k in, and my butt, like, it was great. It was with family and friends, and we were having this great day out, and the sun was shining, and we did it on the track between Mullingar and Athlone, and that's 44k. So we got down, had lunch at halfway point, turned around, and we were coming back, and I was like, this isn't long enough. I'm going to have to turn around before I get to the end, go backwards against ourselves again, and then do the final distance. And so that was grand. So we got about 80k in, and my back and my neck and my arms were like going into spasm, and I was in the innermost cave.
The Misogi zone.
I was like, this is what I want.
Yeah.
Like, I was meat, and I had to be by myself. And I was just in this like dark place that I was choosing to be in. And it was beautiful, but it got a whole lot more poetic than that, because with about 5k to go now, I was toast at this stage.
Right.
The battery on the bike went, and these bikes aren't designed to be cycled without the battery. Now it's minimal assist that I get. It's just enough to keep me rolling on, but it's that trickle of battery that I just needed. But I had no battery left, and so the bike all of a sudden becomes so heavy to cycle, and we miscalculated the point that we turned around, and so we got back to the car park and checked the clock, and I still had 2.5k to do.
Oh God!
And I was now, after being on perfectly paved greenway all day, I was in this broken up industrial estate, with roads that were in awful state, cycling past waste disposal units after being in the perfect outdoors all day, in the trees and on a lovely surface. And it was just such a poetic finish. It was like, how much do you actually want this? And there's a funny video at the end where I am literally crawling over the finish line. I'm barely moving. And my sister's taking a video, and my dad just goes, pure stubbornness got him over the line. And it was true though, but like I actually look back on the last 20k as being, that's what I did it for. It was like to meet that part of myself, and I can't wait to go out and try to do that again this summer. It's like, I just want to be back there in that zone that is a place of voluntary control, of challenge that you're choosing. And I don't know, for me, it's one of the places that I feel most alive.
Do you know what really strikes me, Jack? You were talking about the first holiday after your accident with your family, and the whole world closed down, the Wild West where you love to be. All of a sudden now you're back there. You're back in the outdoors. You're pushing yourself to these levels. And that might seem kind of is superhuman, to be quite honest. But how can other people access that, confront that kind of a change? And you touched on something there, like the tedious level of your rehab. Now, the consequences of you not doing that is keeping you accountable to a certain extent, but then you're going and pushing it to whole other levels with the Misogis and doing these kinds of things. What what advice? Because people are just immune to change. People want the status quo. They really struggle with change, even though the status quo can be really, really difficult. What would your insights would be? Because you've had change forced upon you, and then you've come out the other side and you're pushing those edges. You're looking for the edge all the time. What's the secret sauce for you? Is there something?
Look, in a way, I think you've had this realization as well, Brian. Your book is called Bonus Time, right?
Yeah. Living on bonus time.
Yeah. And I think my injury certainly made it real to me that we get one shot. Like,
yeah,
you get to do it once.
Yeah.
And the thing is like, not every day are you in good shape. Not every day do you have the strength for the fight. But if you say, yes, I can, and you keep on fighting 51% of the time, that's a good starting place. You're moving in the right direction over time. But after you put the kind of foundational pieces back together, after something like you working through addiction and the underlying pieces that were driving that and so on, and in my case, sort of the processing and coming to terms with it, and to be honest, putting together the very practical day-to-day supports that I need and the equipment that allows me to do these things, like all of that takes time. But now that a lot of those pieces are in place for me, I'm back in a place where I can, like I said earlier, adventure is important to me. But I also have the recognition that we get to do this once. So I don't want to put off that adventure. I want to find ways to embrace it regularly. And the thing, I suppose, for people to realize, and the Stoics talk about this a lot, is that, you know, we're dying a little bit every day. And that should encourage you to live.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that you need to go out and do anything wild or to challenge yourself in the ways that I like to do it. But maybe it encourages to be a bit more present with the things of your life that are important to you. And it's very easy to look on at the circumstances in my life, and they're kind of outlier circumstances. And to say, oh, well, you know, the challenge that I face in life is nothing compared to that. But it's your upper limit of experience, whatever it is, you know, and
I love that.
And I think challenge and the tribulations that we go through they're our own, you know, and they are our upper limits of experience, and they matter because they're ours. And it's balancing, sort of processing and working through those things in the healthiest way that we can, with recognizing that, you know, we do only get to do this once, and you will never be like, I saw Jimmy Carr talking about this recently, like when you get to 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, like you would give anything to have the health, the energy, the strength and dexterity and mobility and so on that your 20-year younger self had. And so why wait to sort of respect that stage of life that you're at by doing the things that are important to you, whatever that is.
Be grateful for it now.
Yeah. And so I think I've had that realization. And so for me to go through the rough and tumble of a ski trip is worth it, to be up in the mountains, to breathe that fresh, crisp air, to look across at the peaks in the distance. That is just soul medicine.
Soul medicine.
I've just got this new off-roading hand bike that I cannot wait to get out and about with. So actually, this is a funny story. So I went over to, always looking for new ways to be back into the outdoors. And every time I go down to the west of Ireland, I nearly have something new to navigate the place in a new way, and it's just magic, right? But I was last June, I went over to Norway to try out this off-roading bike. It's kind of like a quad, except it's instead of sitting on it, you sit in it. It's fully electric and it's designed for people with reduced mobility.
Okay.
But this thing will go anywhere. And I got so buzzed up that I put the order in, and I drive a van and there's a lift in at the back of the van. And I was like, class, I can't wait to stick this in the back of the van and head off on adventures. The bike arrived before Christmas and it was not fit on the lift.
Oh, God. In a bigger van.
So the option is to buy a bigger van. Well, last week I got a tow hitch and I'm out playing farmer at the moment, trying different trailers. So this thing has grown arms and legs. But I'm after getting this off-roading bike. So like the ski trip is one thing, but I wanted to be in the mountains in Ireland. And so this bike is going to get me access to that again. So we'll have to go for a hike.
Definitely, Jack. Yeah.
And then for me, getting on the hand cycle and physically challenging myself, like that, it speaks to my values, because it's like, it's health enhancing. It gives me chance to spend time and have long conversations in the outdoors with friends and family. It brings me to new places. That's the adventure. It allows me to challenge myself, which is an adventure in itself. Like, these things are inherent to who I am. And I think people comparing themselves against the pursuits that I enjoy doing this stuff. So it is to look at your own life. It is to say, what are the things that I value the most, and how can I regularly include those in my life, in small ways in my days, in bigger ways over the course of a week, a month, a year. And to be present to actually doing those things, because the weeks slip by very quickly.
Yeah.
And if you're not deliberate about getting them in the diary, these things just pass us by. And so I think in a way, both of us have been fortunate to have had that realization that you get to do it once. And maybe for others that are listening, it's not that I have advice, but it is maybe to recognize that.
Yeah.
We get one shot, and to what extent are you including the things that you say you value in practice in your life?
There's a book that I know I'm sure we've chatted about before, Tuesday at Maury's.
Yes.
What a book. And Maury, in that book, he's someone that was going to die, and he was given life advice. And he says, most people know they're going to die, but they don't believe it. It's only when you believe you're going to die that you truly start to live. And I actually have, I don't know whether I told you this before, Jack, I have my life in weeks. It's a calendar on my door at home. So every Monday night, last night I done it, and I tick off another week on. So I deliberately, and it's not about this morbid thing about death. It's marking off the weeks I'm living, or I'm getting closer to death, I suppose. So I can actively really live. And it's just so important to make the most of your life. But there's loads of seeds planted. One seed that I've got to put out here, we've got to go on a hike together, but a seed that dropped into my head, I am always trying to wrangle a way of turning my work, linking it to a ski holiday. We need to do something, Jack. We need to bring a group of people over on a skiing holiday. We'll get to ski together, and we'll get it to be a part of our jobs as well. So let's just let that seed fester there.
We'll find a way.
But even what you said, like setbacks, so many people struggle with setbacks. But like you, the bike, you couldn't go hiking. Now you got a bike. The bike didn't fit. You didn't say, why me? What can I do about this? It's the active piece. And it's that mindset I think is really, really important. And I want to share something to you. Lots of people, I'm on a lot of the time, and I think my bonus time, my second chance at life that I call it, has given me sort of an enthusiasm for life, where I'm on and I'm happy most of the time. But I had a really challenging, I had a really busy 2024, and I needed to relax and chill out. But then a family member, we spent the month of January, where I was hoping to have a great relaxing time. We spent it in the ICU, and we had a dream holiday cancelled on the back of that because they passed. And I found myself in recent weeks feeling a little bit low and a little bit down. And not in any way that was going to debilitate me in any way, but I was very aware of it. And it was the first time I've experienced that in nearly 13 years of recovery. I says, oh wow, I'm feeling quite down in comparison to where I really was. But it wasn't like, what can I do about this? And I was back to basics. And it's what you said there a few minutes ago, present moment awareness. I brought myself back to the present, spending time with loved ones, exercising, but back to basics, time in nature. I've spent so much time in nature. And I know you always slag me about the post with me little dog Lily. We have a good laugh
Wearing a
about
jacket.
that. Wearing a jacket. But
What's your dog? I was like, I can't look at you.
but
Take that jacket off your dog.
Time I was forced, Jack. I'm showing weakness here. I was forced. She has a lovely little lighted collar as well. I haven't showed you that.
It's too much.
But back to basics. That's back to basics.
There's nothing basic about a dog, but
we're gonna cut this bit. Dog with a collar, dog with a jacket, a little Bijan free with a jacket. And a collar that lights up in the dark. Oh God, intimidating. You said you got a right, Jack.
Yeah, that's pure intimidation.
Very intimidating. Oh, brilliant. But here, Jack, I had about 15 questions. My laptop went dead and I haven't looked at one of them. I just loved this conversation. Is there anything you'd like to add here? The essence of this podcast is called Change is Possible. Any open-ended insights on that for other people or for anything that drops?
Yeah, something that has been really pivotal in my life is, I think, perspective and stories are really important. The thing that I'll say about stories is that stories are sticky. And the stories that we buy into and believe about what someone like me, from the place that I'm from the family I'm from, with the circumstances that I have, is capable of in the world, that's a sticky story. And the stories that we believe to be true about ourselves and the people around us will lead to certain thoughts, behaviors, and actions. And podcasts are an amazing way for you to entertain different stories. And at any time you can change or tweak the story that of your own life,
Yeah.
And reimagine what the next chapter might be. And so I think that's the first thing that I would say.
I mean, you say sticky, Jack. I have my own interpretation of that. Does that mean that they have a big, they're stuck to you in a way that they have a big impact on how you are in the world?
Yeah. Like if the default of your story is victimhood, or that plays out in the world.
Yeah.
That plays out, and the second thing I would say is that perspective shapes reality. You said previously the Hafiz quote, that the words we speak become the house we live in.
Yeah.
But the perspective that we look at the world through makes the world what it is. And this was partially influenced by the book The Green Platform in the early days, but on the flight over to come and find me in Portugal, my dad asked my mum a question. Or my mum asked my dad a question, sorry. And it's a question we've all asked at different times in one shape or form. And she asked Dad, why Jack? Why would this happen to Jack? Very understandable. And I think when shit has hit the fan, or we've gotten a curveball, or things haven't gone our way, we've all found ourselves asking, why me? Why us? Why now? And it's an understandable question. It's an important question. And it's important because it allows you to reconcile and face the truth of what's going on, whatever that is. Or to feel the pain or hurt of the unfairness of life sometimes. And I definitely asked that question too over the next period of time as I began the journey of grief. And certainly as I went through the dip, the shock and denial, the anger, the frustration, the bargaining and the depression. But when you hit the dip, whatever way that is, and you start reconstructing, it's around that time that I started entertaining a different perspective. Why me is full of victimhood. It's full of blame and excuses, and it is in ways full of denial, and it leads you down one road. But at the dip, you can stay there with why me, or you can make a choice. And on the plane that day, my dad responded to my mum by saying, well, why not, Jack? Why should this have happened to anyone else on the beach? And when I tell this story publicly, like I say, and the truth of it is I learned about that conversation 3 years after it happened, and the first thing I said to him was, cheers, Dad. But he was dead right.
Yeah.
Why not, Jack? Why should I have been so lucky? Why should we as a family have been so lucky? I would never have wished this to happen to anyone else on the beach. And that is just as hard a question to ask as why me? Because why not me forces you to take ownership. And there's a level of acceptance that you're encouraged towards. And it asks of you that you realize you've got agency and choices, and that you can find solutions, and that you can take action. And they're all hard things as well as asking, why not me? Asking why not me? There's hard parts to that, just like why me? They're two fundamentally different perspectives though. And the questions we ask of ourselves and the world give us different perspectives. And they will lead you to see two different realities in the world. And there are times when I still slip into why me, or in different parts of life, and have to catch myself. And, I find those things, like this podcast is called Change is Possible. And change is possible is allowing yourself to entertain the question, why not me?
I absolutely love that, Jack. It's a beautiful perspective shift, and I think that could be the key to change, is to allow yourself agency to make that change. It's really, really unbelievable. Jack, thanks so much for coming here. The biggest takeaway I have is probably a very selfish one. We need to make this ski thing happen. I'm dead serious about that.
We'll get up the Dublin mountains first.
We'll do that first. I've been looking for an angle for this for a long time. But thanks so much, Jack, for coming along. I feel I was sitting here just thinking it's a privilege to spend this time with you, but to have this conversation where I'm really struggling for words. Sometimes I just feel something and there's a knowing and it just felt right. And I just feel a big part of me bonus time to sit here and to spend this time with you was just absolutely phenomenal. So thanks so much for coming along, and we'll be up on the mountain soon. Thank you.
Absolute pleasure. Loved it.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to today's podcast. If you enjoy this content, I've created a range of online courses around mindset, mastering your self-talk, unlocking the secrets of addiction recovery and morning routines, and many, many more. If you're interested, simply click on the link in the show notes and use the word resilience to get free access to all of that content.